Okay, so I used this tracing paper to make the pattern for my pants block, and I just taped two pieces of the tracing paper together since I'm going to be making the pattern for the front and the back of my pants. So once I taped the paper together, I flipped it over so that the tape was on the wrong side. Now I'm drawing a horizontal line that is the measurement of my hips divided in half. So my hip measurement was 41.5 inches, so I just divided that in half. And then I labeled the start of the line A and then the end of the line B. Starting from point A, I just measured all the way down basically how long I want my pants to be from my waist to the bottom of my ankle, and then I made a mark, and then I just drew a straight vertical line connecting from point A all the way down to that mark that I previously made. And then starting at point B, I repeated the same steps. So just drawing a line all the way down to where I want the bottom of my pants to fall. So then I titled or I labeled the end of that line that connects to B, I labeled it point C, and then the end of the other side, I labeled it D. And then I just drew a horizontal line to connect point C and D so that I have a rectangle now. So I want to divide the rectangle in half, and in order to do that, I just took my measuring tape and measured the full width of points or between points A and B. I folded my measuring tape in half, and then I made a mark where the midpoint of my measuring tape landed. And I did the same thing at the bottom of the rectangle. So then from there, I now have 2 points, and I just took my ruler and drew a vertical line to connect the 2 points so that my rectangle would be officially divided in half. And essentially the half of this rectangle represents the front pattern and then the back pattern for the pants. I labeled the top of the midpoint line number 1, and then the bottom of the line is labeled number 2. Hi! So I know we're already pretty deep into this tutorial, but I just wanted to take a moment to give you a little break. If you are new to my channel and you haven't seen any of my other videos, I just wanted to let you know that on this channel, you can expect to find loads of sewing tutorials. Some of the tutorials that I have are on things that I've made from scratch to finish. And then I have other tutorials where I've taken already made garments and I've kind of chopped and screwed them to create something new with them. If you're into that sort of fashion tutorial, DIY fun stuff, you should definitely check out my other videos. And if you have any questions or you want to share some love, then you can leave a comment down below. And if you're curious about any of the supplies that I use in this tutorial or any supplies that I use in general, check out the link to my Amazon storefront in the description box. And if you're enjoying this video so far, then please hit the like button and share the love. I'll see you at the end. Starting at point A, I measured and marked the hip depth. And the hip depth is basically the distance between your waist to your hips, and that for me was 8 inches. And I repeated the same step from starting at point B. So from point B, I measured and marked 8 inches. And then the next thing I did was I connected those 2 points that I just marked with a horizontal line. And at the start of the horizontal line, I labeled it E. And then at the end of the horizontal line, I labeled it F. And then in the middle of that line, I labeled it with the number 3. And this line from point E to F is basically our hip depth line. So now we want to make our rise line. And in order to do that, we are going to start at point A and we're going to measure and mark the rise. The rise is also known as the crotch depth. So basically when you take a seat and you measure from your waist to your crotch, and that for me is 12 inches. And I repeated the same step with point B. So starting at point B, I measured and marked the crotch depth, which is 12 inches again. And then I just connected these 2 points with a horizontal line like so. And I labeled the start of this horizontal line G, and then the finish of this horizontal line H, and then the middle of the horizontal line, I labeled it with the number 4. And this line here is going to be the crotch depth, or the rise line. Then starting at point A, I measured and marked the knee depth. So that's basically the distance between your waist to your knee. And that for me was 24 inches. And I just marked off the 24-inch point. And then I repeated the same step. Starting at point B, I just measured and marked 24 inches. And then once I marked it off, I used a horizontal line to connect the 2 points. And those 2 points are basically, or that line is basically the knee line. And at the start of that line, I labeled it with the letter I. And then at the end of that line, I labeled it with the letter J. And in the middle of that line, I labeled it with the number 5. Starting at point A, I measured and marked 1 inch down from point A, and I called this point K. And then from point K, I measured 1 inch to the right of point K, and I made a mark, and this mark is point L. Then from part L, I drew a horizontal line, or a diagonal line, that connected from part L all the way up to the top of the rectangle, and I made sure that the line is 1/4 of my waist measurement. Then I labeled the end of that diagonal line with the letter M, and then I drew a line to connect the letter M to point 3. And I used my curved ruler to do this because this part is basically going to be the curve of my hip. And then I just connected point 3 to point 4, which is basically a straight line, but that's going to be the side of the front part of my pants. Then from point G, I drew a horizontal line that extends the same measurement as my front crotch, and I have the calculations on how you can find your front crotch measurement, but that for me was 1.5 inches. So my line extends out by 1.5 inches, and at the start of that line, I labeled it with the letter N. Then starting at point G, I drew a diagonal line that's about 45 degrees, and it is 1.5 centimeters long, and I labeled the top of that diagonal line with the letter O. So here I made a mistake and I had to white out the line that I previously drew. The correct thing to do is to connect points N, O, E, and L. So make sure that you are either using a curved ruler or you can freehand it, but don't forget to connect to point E. And this is what it looked like for me once I connected those 4 points. It looks a little weird, but I'll go back and fix it a little later. So starting at point 5, I measured 3 centimeters to the left and I made a mark. And then I labeled that mark with the letter P. And then I repeated the same step starting at point 2. I measured 3 centimeters to the left and labeled that point Q. And I did it off camera, so I just wanted to show you how I was able to get those points. The next thing I did was I connected points N, I, and D. And this is basically going to be the inner part of our pant pattern, so like the inseam. And then I connected points 4, P, and Q. So P and Q are basically already connected, so I really just needed to connect the number 4 and the letter P. and that's going to be the outer seam for the front part of the pant pattern. So this is what the front part of the pants pattern looks like. Starting at point B, you're going to measure and mark 1 inch to the left of point B, and we'll label this point R. Then from point R, you're going to measure 1 inch up and make a mark, and we'll call that point S. From point S, you're going to draw a line that is 1/4 of your waist measurement plus 1 inch, and the line should extend down onto the horizontal line of the rectangle. We'll call the other side of this line point T. Then you want to connect T, 3, and 4, and this is basically a straight line, so I'm just going to go over it to make the line more prominent. Next thing I did was I calculated my back crotch measurement, and I have the calculations for that here on screen, and I extended the line at point H to the total distance of my back crotch measurement. That for me was 4.6 inches, and I labeled the end of that line with the letter V. So starting at point H again, I drew a diagonal line that's about 4.5 centimeters long, and I drew it at a 45-degree angle. Starting at point F, I measured 1 inch up, and I marked that point with the letter U. Then I connected point S, U, the end of the 45-degree line, and then point V. I'm not always the best at using my curved ruler, so I decided to just eyeball the curve with a pencil first, and then I traced it over with a marker, as you can see here. So this is what the back crotch is looking like. Then at point J, I drew a line that was 2 centimeters long, and I labeled the end of that line with the letter W. Then I repeated the same step starting at point C. So I drew a line that was 2 centimeters long, and then at the end of this line, I labeled it with the letter X. Then starting at point 5, I measured a 1/2 inch in, and then I labeled this point with the letter Y. And I repeated the same step starting at point 2. So I measured a 1/2 inch in, and then I labeled this point with the letter Z. Then I connected the letters V, W, X, and then I connected the points 4, Y, and Z. Then I connected the letters Z and X to make the hemline. Then I measured the midway point between the letter T and S. So I just took my measuring tape and folded it in half along that line, and then made a mark at the fold of my measuring tape. Then I took this point and I extended it so that it was 2 inches long. Then I placed a mark that was a 1/2 inch to the left and a 1/2 inch to the right of this line. Then I drew a diagonal line to connect the bottom of that 2 inch line to those 2 points, and that is what creates our dart. Then I measured the halfway point between the letter V and W, so I just folded my measuring tape in half and made a mark at the fold. And then a 1/2 of a centimeter in from this point, I made a mark. And it's kind of hard to see, but I just connected that mark to the letters V and the letter W, and I used my pencil just to do a test run. And then once I was sure, I traced over the new curve with a marker. Then I measured the 1/2 point between N and I, and then at that point I measured a 1/2 of a centimeter in, and then I just drew a new line to connect N to that new point, and then to the letter I. And again, I just practiced with a pencil first, and then I traced it over with a marker. So this is what the final pattern is looking like. I traced my pattern onto some muslin, and I made sure that my pattern was aligned with the grain line, and then I just tested the pattern to see if there was any areas that I needed to adjust. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Remember that if you have any questions, you can leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to get back to you and to help you answer the questions that you have. And I'm so thankful that you spent this time with me, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next tutorial. Let me know what my next tutorial should be about, actually, because I still haven't decided yet. So yeah. Until next time, ciao!